Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast where we are breaking down and celebrating the film Young Frankenstein, one pet training treat at a time. I'm your host, Alan Sanders.
And I'm your co-host, Walt Murray.
And closing out the week with us here on The Wilder Ride, welcome back Eric Nash of his own podcast in the Movies by Minutes format, The Watchmen Minute. Thanks for being here and spending the rest of the week with us.
Oh, yeah, it's been great. This is a great movie, and I love analyzing these things.
It is fun. I don't know what's wrong with all of us. There must be something.
We got a screw loose, I think.
There's something wrong.
We may be listed as AB normal when it comes to doing this.
Abby, someone.
But I will tell you, at the very least, even if you're not as in-depth or if you don't do as much research, there is something about just focusing on 1 minute at a time instead of sort of just kind of sitting back and letting the images flow by when you really are concentrating. It really shows you in a different way how to be a really active movie watcher. If you haven't figured out why some people in the room can guess who the murderer is and you're still trying to figure out what happened, you might not be the active movie watcher. You might be more of that passive, just kind of show me stuff.
Yeah, and I tend to, I'll put a movie on and read a book.
Well, what's the point of putting the movie on?
It drives my family crazy because they'll say, well, Dad, didn't you see that? And I have this weird thing. I'm ADD. Which I know that's a shock to everyone. But there's a weird thing that goes on in the ADD brain where you can almost focus on two things at once.
The manufacture, packaging, distribution, and marketing of
Really? So what's your excuse for what you're doing here?
You have to care.
You have to care. You have to care. Oh, my God.
No, I wish that there was a scientist who could explain it to me or that I could understand what the scientist says, that I'm paying more attention to the pub than I am to the
All right.
scientist,
Well, since we haven't even begun to talk about this minute and you've brought this up, do you think this is the advent of instantaneous social media that has us always wanting to be reading something while we're doing something else?
I think so. Well, we could spend a long time on my opinions on social media, but yeah, I think so. I think we're being bombarded with so much information right now, and it's almost like we're creating an ADD generation or feeding an ADD generation.
Is it ADD or is it the fear of missing out? Because I find myself going to Facebook all the time because I want to make sure I didn't miss what someone posted. Like, what's Walt up to? Or what did somebody post in the listener's guide? Or, what did my brother do because he was going out fishing? Did he catch anything? I feel like, and there is this phenomenon, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, or FOMO.
Yeah, and I've always kind of had that, and I think it's why I'm a little bit of a news hound, that I watch the news a lot, pay attention to it. But, when we were kids, growing up in the 70s and somewhat in the 80s, it was okay to be bored.
Really? Like, you didn't have to have something at your fingertips nonstop?
It was crazy. And I'd say, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm bored. And they're like, okay, go outside.
We'll go out and play.
Well, it's pouring down rain. Okay, go outside. It was okay. It was all right to be bored. When you were bored, you'd read or you'd watch TV or whatever. But it was okay for your brain not to be engaged all the time. And it allowed us to be more creative, that we would build our own forts or we'd go play army or whatever. And now it's like everything's done for us. Because like you said, even though we are going out to Facebook and reading, it's kind of scripted. It's already there. We're more absorbing those kind of things instead of letting our brains go be creative. How did we get on that?
I'll get to it. Eric, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think there are some detriments to the various social networks and stuff. If we all become robots, oh well. That'll be fun. That'll be fun.
He's
too.
like, I'm into it.
Whatever.
I think I'm a little younger than you guys.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So I might have that.
Well, and I find myself sometimes just I'll be driving somewhere to a meeting or something, and I'll just turn the radio off and just let there be some quiet for a few minutes. Not often, being ADD, I do like that input all the time, but there is something healthy about just having some quiet to let your brain go where it needs to, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like to fish and do some other things like that, just to absorb the quiet.
Well, let me do this then, because Eric, you made a comment about being maybe a little younger than us, but you do something randomly on Facebook that I wish I knew the lyrics better. You are a huge Beatles fan.
Yeah, so I post almost daily. Every now and then there's a day or two that might go by, but I'll post a line or maybe even less. Every now and then 2 lines for maybe a less well-known Beatles song, but post those and just let people have at it. Try to guess what the song title is of their catalog.
I realized, thanks to you, just how few Beatles songs I know by heart. I'm aware of their catalog. I'm aware of them, obviously, as a cultural icon for the music industry. But I think I've only guessed 2 out of the barrel without, resulting. And I'm pretty proud. Most of the people don't seem to go cheat. Most of the people are really trying to guess on their own from the time it takes sometimes for somebody to answer you.
Yeah, there are some other pretty big fanatics, I think, that are friends of mine that do pipe in pretty quick every now and then, especially for the more number 1 hits, singles, what have you, that they put out. But when I go deeper cut, yeah, they can go a couple days, and I'll have to start giving clues.
Now, you have one today, while we're recording this, saying, "Remember to live and let live." I have absolutely no idea where that line comes from, because the minute
I noticed I've been doing Solo Sunday. So that's the solo catalogs of the 4 members.
So Live and Let Die.
And this is Supergroup Sunday, though.
Oh, okay.
Which is a big clue.
You're going to have to, you got to give
how many supergroups were they in, really?
Well, isn't that from Live and Let Die?
No, Live and Let...
Nope. Yeah, then that's the other kind of...
See, he does this all the time. He me off because he purposely picks a lyric that sounds almost identical to another song, and I think, oh my god, I'm going to be the first to get it, and rather than think about it, much like our problem at trivia night where we just rush to the first answer and are usually wrong, and if we had just paused, we would have gone, oh wait, we're wrong. No, I usually post the wrong answer. So this is not from Live and Let Live or Live and Let Die.
Okay, give me the lyric again.
Remember to live and let live, from a supergroup. And that makes for some great podcast right there. Doesn't work in radio, doesn't even work in podcast. Dead air never works.
I kind of feel like that Homer Simpson scene where they say what's going on in Homer's brain, and it's 2 monkeys on a seesaw. You got me. You got me on that one.
Would it be something from the Traveling Wilburys?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Wow, that was pretty...
So as a supergroup, because I was just trying to think, if it was George Harrison with the supergroup, then it has to be a Traveling Wilbury song. But that's it. You've tapped into my ability, my catalog of knowledge right there.
Well, certainly since we're recording this, then later on this comes out, I'll certainly tell you if you're ready for it.
Absolutely, yes. Because
please.
you're not going to be surprising anybody 2.5 months from now or a month and a half from now.
End of the line.
Okay.
And one of the common parts of the chorus, what have you, is, well, it's all right.
Well, it's all right, even if they say you're wrong. Well, it's all right. Sometimes you gotta be strong.
Right.
Keep saying at the beginning of each line.
Right.
And then they say it end of the line at the end of each line.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Now I just have to go. I'm going to go grab a little bit. I'm going to insert it here when I edit this all together. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get to this minute, so we will finish up the week on a positive note. At least for the creature, he's going to get a reward at the end of the minute. We're going to start with the audience still screaming here as the creature has stumbled onto the stage, and we will end with a little treat being popped into the creature's mouth for being a good boy. Oh, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? And let's get to it here. We begin again with a reverse camera shot. The last time we left, we saw from the back of the theater, everybody starting to stand up and scream, and we hear like almost some ridiculous sound overs of the audience screaming. Well, we then go immediately at the beginning of this minute to the reverse angle and seeing what it looks like from the stage out into the audience. And actually the camera does a pull back to wide and show everybody freaking out.
Yeah, they are freaking out. It's what you would expect if the creature hadn't torn through the town 5 times previously. They go from really absolutely deriding the doctor to now realizing what's going on. And I mean, they are completely freaking out.
If you freeze, which of course we don't get the luxury of doing this in the theater, but when you freeze frame as the camera has pulled completely out to about second number 3, toward the very bottom but center frame, you've got an older looking gentleman with what may be his wife next to him. He's getting ready to do a cat call, and just a second before, she was kind of looking like, what's everybody looking at? Like the two most disinterested people. Everybody else is sort of freaking out, covering their mouths, looking like they're ready to leave, and she's just like, honey, what's going on?
Oh, well.
Why is this going on? So we've got a clueless couple up front.
Yeah, well, having been an extra...
Yes, why don't you tell us about how hard it is to react to something that's not actually there?
It's a challenge. It stretched me. I as I've said before, I realize that I'm not very emotive sometimes.
You're not Peter Boyle?
I'm not Peter Boyle, and I am not Gene Wilder. But to get the whole audience to react to something all at once, that is a little bit of a challenge. I mean, you would hope that everybody's paying attention and everybody does what they're supposed to do, but it is a little bit like cat herding, that you've got to get everybody there.
Well, tell everybody, just in case they missed the last time we talked about this small, off, almost independent feature film you were in.
Yeah, it's this very little known series of films from Star Trek.
The reboots.
The reboots, yes. I was in Star Trek Into Darkness, the return of Khan, which...
Don't. I like the movie.
Oh, I love the movie. Yeah. I thought it was great.
Wow, man, we got a crazy threesome here.
Yes, yeah. We found the 3 guys who of our kind of ilk.
That's right.
There's a lot of people who love the movies, but apparently, if you grew up with the original Star Trek, you're supposed to hate the J.J. Abrams. Let's make Star Trek cool, fun, and accessible to a really wide audience. That sucks.
Yeah, that's not the way to go. We want it to be a fan film that only can be seen by like 43 people.
We are such Star Trek nerds that we hate everything Star Trek now.
Well, if William Shatner isn't playing Captain Kirk, then it isn't real. Yeah.
So, Eric, you like the Star Trek reboots. At least you find them entertaining.
Oh, yeah. And even the last one, the Beyond, it seems like that's kind of gotten some bad talk about it lately.
Which is crazy, because I thought it was
probably the one I would go to the least at this point.
Yeah,
but,
it's
Into
amazing.
Darkness I think was really good.
It is amazing that the folks who are anti the J.J. Abrams kind of franchise reboot. What do they call it? The Kelvin storyline now?
Mm-hmm.
So most of the ones that are diehard, the original was best, like Beyond the best, and that was the least liked by general audiences that may not have had that history of the other Star Trek. So here's a lesson. Sometimes going toward the classic Trek material, you may lose the modern audience that didn't grow up in that same world. And I think we're seeing some of that with the backlash in the Star Wars universe, where they're trying to tell a story for a modern audience, and you've got all these 40 and 50 somethings who are like, you're killing my Star Wars. What are you doing?
Well, and I think it's important as a fan, and I really try to do this. I try to go into a movie saying, entertain me. First off, entertain me. Tell me a good story. And I think that the 2009 Star Trek reboot, I think Into Darkness, and I think Beyond did a pretty good job of that. I think they tell a pretty good story.
I own them all. I own them all on Blu-ray.
Wow.
Which is a step up from you.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I own them in my mind.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the exact same way. I'm going to come at it fresh. I'm not going to come at any reboot or reimagining with my preconceived notion of what it's supposed to be. Now, some reboots suck. There's no doubt about it.
No question.
But in this case, I'm a fan of the Star Trek movies, and I'll put myself out there. I've loved the 2 new Star Wars movies, in this case what we're talking about, part of the Skywalker series. I liked The Force Awakens a lot. I thought it was a little bit of a Star Wars reboot. I loved The Last Jedi, but apparently I'm in the camp that doesn't know better.
No, I loved it too. And I think that a reboot is, in my mind and in my heart, I guess, a better thing than a remake. I'm not a big fan of remakes sometimes. Mm-hmm. That is why I did have a little bit of a tough time with Into Darkness, but at the end of the day, I thought it was
because it was trying to do 2 things at once. It was part of a new story, but they were kind of rehashing the Khan story.
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you. If you did a number 2 in that series and it wasn't Khan, there would have been a whole different group of people showing up at your house with torches ready to burn you down.
With a mob of... much like the end of Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, taking that... you were damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
Now, if you tried to remake Young Frankenstein, I think I would probably be a group with torches coming at you. There are certain, Jaws. I think that a Jaws.
Well, they keep
remake
trying to
would have been
remake
terrible.
Jaws, but it's never Jaws. They call it other things. But
I'm interested in Meg, to be
are
honest.
you really?
Yeah. As soon as I first heard that, it's Meg. It's short for Megalodon, and it's like, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool.
See,
It
when
looks
you
crazy,
say
doesn't it?
that, and you say, hey, there's going to be a shark movie called Meg, and it's short for Megalodon, I'm like, ooh. And then I went and saw the trailer, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
First of all, I mean, you've got basically a guy who's not known for delivering brilliant dialogue as your lead character. And some of the special effect shots look like they're there for the special effect shots. So that already, I'm not saying I won't give it a chance, but you've kind of already lost me with the first trailer.
Well, how many times have we said with Young Frankenstein that we're looking at a movie that was made in 1974 with very, very few special effects, and it's an awesome movie. It's a great story. It's a fantastic movie, great humor, so many great things. And really hardly any special effects. And even the effects are actual effects where you have actual electricity flying
Practical
around
effects? What's with you, man?
No, that's insane. I don't know. I think we could go on for forever.
Yeah, apparently we should probably get back to the movie we actually wanted to talk about. We should save some of this for some bonus material. The doctor starts off at the very beginning. His first line after everybody's screaming is, "Please remain in your seats, I beg you. We are not children here. We are scientists. I assure you, there is nothing to fear." Walt, every movie I have ever seen where somebody tells me that there is nothing to fear, I'm suddenly worried.
Yeah, even in real life.
He's like, oh yeah, the wife says, "Come in here and talk to me. Don't worry, there's nothing to fear."
Nope.
I'm crying. I'm already crying. I'm weeping like a child.
I got to go to work.
I gotta go to work.
You know you're in big trouble when they say there's nothing to fear.
Eric, what about you? When you hear that in a movie, when someone who's getting ready to have the big reveal of the quote dangerous thing or the new technology or the new way we're going to live our lives better, and they say you have nothing to fear, isn't that sort of like the telegraph that we have absolutely everything to fear?
Yeah, that is a really good point. Yeah, it's very much a cliche, that one person is telling a group of people, whether it's a huge audience kind of like this, or somewhat huge, I guess, but it could be certainly a lot smaller group of people and saying something like that, nothing to fear, and that's not a good sign, no.
No, it's not. It usually doesn't telegraph well for the next few minutes of the movie. Or, in this case, like, again, a parent. Or, like we saw earlier with how you fool your kids to tell you the truth. When my wife says, "Oh, no, I will not get angry. I promise you, I will not get angry. I just want to know what happened." Yeah, that's a trap.
Well, just yesterday, I was in the kitchen and I called to one of my daughters and I said, "Hey, could you come in here real quick?" And she said, "What did I do?" So yeah, it's kind of the same thing. It instills fear and dread.
Eric, have you ever had that where either the significant other or a parent calls you into the room and you're doing it in almost an overly nice way and it automatically puts the spidey senses on edge?
I don't know if I was smart enough for that when I was younger.
My kids have become so in tune, we now have to trick them to think that they're not being tricked.
Yeah. Good luck. Well, I think it's an interesting thing because he does really kind of call out to their intellect.
He does. We are not children here.
Don't pay attention to the big giant hulking creature here. Pay attention to the fact that this is really science. We are scientists and this is science.
He does scold the audience. He does come across as literally scolding them.
Remain in your seats, I beg you. We are not children here. We are scientists. I assure you there is nothing to fear.
And then, which I wanted to get to because I looked this up and I couldn't find it anywhere. I looked in medical literature. I looked in the dictionary. I even looked in the Urban Dictionary, which, by the way, that's a very scary trip.
Yeah.
When he gets everyone to calm down, he says, "First, may I offer for your consideration a neurological demonstration of the primary cerebellar functions, balance and coordination." What the hell?
Yeah, he invented
is cerebellar.
Yeah, he invented a word there.
Eric, any idea what the cerebellar is?
The Google search that I did for that, did lead us to cerebellum, that's for sure. But, I didn't try to figure it out if it truly is an okay form of cerebellum or not. If you looked and couldn't find it in a dictionary, online or otherwise,
Now, what I did do, you say you Googled Sarah Beller, but I went ahead and Googled Sarah Beller, and apparently she is an organizer, educator, and facilitator, as well as an innovator of conflict resolution, which I think maybe, who knew that they would be so prescient, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, that where we've got an audience of people that are losing their minds, that we are actually evoking someone today whose job it is to be a conflict resolution specialist in the Washington, D.C. area.
Well, and maybe that's what he was calling on. He was asking her to come out and kind of calm the crowd down and get things back on track for him.
I'm wondering if I have to hashtag and ask if it's okay to use her profile. It's on LinkedIn, so I just did a search for Sarah Beller, and boom, first thing came up. And I thought, this is hysterical. I have got to talk about this minute. Yeah, all these people suddenly liking Sarah Beller on LinkedIn.
Why have 500 people viewed my
Can you
profile?
help me? I've got this creature lumbering around, and I don't know if my scientist genes are coming out or if my child genes are coming out.
We've just made her rich.
I just got scolded by somebody who brought somebody back from the dead, and I'm a neuroscientist, and I'm afraid. Can you help with my conflict? I need some resolution to my conflict. I'm sorry, Sarah.
She has no idea what just hit her.
She does not. She's got over 500 connections, so I'm going to look this back up after the episode airs and see how many people she's got. Yeah. No, so anyway, that's the only Sarah Beller I could find anything that might have something related to this particular minute. And even then, I'm going to go on a limb and say that was a stretch.
That was a stretch.
That was a Stretch Armstrong stretch.
It's funny that they didn't catch that and correct that.
It was written in the script this way.
Is it really?
It's written, and he puts in quotes as if he's supposed to go like air quotes, but it's written around their Sarah Beller functions, balance and coordination, which are functions of the cerebellum.
That's right.
But not the cerebellar.
Which we have already seen in the original classroom scene.
Right.
When Mr. Hilltop gets kneed in the nethers with the clamp on his cerebellum.
But here it is. When I Google it, it says it's at medicineplus.gov. Cerebellar disorders.
Cerebellar disorders.
Yeah.
In medicine.gov.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a .gov. You can't trust the government.
I don't know if I believe that. Every time I do a search for Sarah Beller, it always says, "Are you sure you don't mean cerebellum?" Well, you know what? Maybe there are other uses out there. Cerebellar disorders. I see that from medicineplus.gov. I just found it. What you're looking at. Isn't that amazing? We're both Googling at the same time.
That is crazy.
Wow.
I'm just sitting here.
I'm going to move on because this is what's supposed to happen next in the script, but this does not happen. Again, I think we're shortening the scene and the brevity is going to be much better suited for this film because apparently what he was supposed to command the monster to do first was stand on your toes. The monster was going to obey. Then he was going to say, stand on your heels. So rather than walk heel toe and then backwards toe heel, he was going to first have him tiptoe and then go on his heels. Some of the audience members were supposed to gasp in amazement and murmur among themselves. And then he was supposed to say, now, walk heel to toe, which is, of course, what we do have in the movie. Now, one of the things that was in the script when he does walk heel to toe that we don't hear, and I've listened with headphones on, and maybe it's just Mel Brooks deciding, because remember, I got a story about this scene, actually, that maybe Mel Brooks wasn't as interested in directing as patiently or as painstakingly, because this whole scene was going to be completely taken out of the movie. They weren't even going to film it.
Right.
He totally thought this was the dumbest joke, and Gene Wilder argued with him for a good 20 or 30 minutes, and then finally Mel Brooks goes, fine, we'll film it. And Gene's like, you are? And he goes, well, I just wanted to see if you would fight hard enough for it, and it's obvious you have, so we'll go ahead and do it. Mel Brooks, as comedic as he was in terms of his thinking, thought this was a dumb scene to put in the movie. This entire King Kong homage throwback of putting on this performance and then eventually seeing the heel toe, the walking and advancing from there.
Which is funny because Mel Brooks is much more of a
slapstick kind of guy?
Slapstick physical humor kind of aficionado. Where Gene is more of an intellectual, cerebral,
much more
comedian.
of a
Sarah Beller.
Sarah Beller kind of guy. Well, one of the audience members was supposed to be given the line to yell, or others were supposed to yell something to the effect of, I don't believe it. Do you think he can do it? But we don't have any of that. We have no audience kind of jives or cat calls. We have none of that. It's just either twittering or murmuring or the oohs and ahs. Well, screaming earlier, but we don't have anybody that we can discern any dialogue.
No, not at all. So I don't know if it got cut or never got filmed or whatever, but I don't think we lose anything in the scene.
No, not yet. Yeah, there's a lot of extra activity that was supposed to take place in this particular minute, but I'm glad we really don't have that.
There is actually
there's an outtake you can get of that.
Outtake out there, and Igor doesn't have a hump.
No, he does not.
I think we lose something with him. I would have loved to have had a little clip of him with no hump, but I don't think in the end we'd really lose anything by losing that dialogue. No,
and actually, and we will get to it next week. I think we get to it next week, unless it was an ad lib, because in the episode that was cut out, the little snippet that you have of this scene that we don't have in the final movie, when he asks, he goes, "Where'd your hump go?" And he goes, "It doesn't come out at night." Which is funny because it's an evening performance based on the lighting of the particular poster, but just one of those Igor-isms that gets thrown in there. Eric, when we hear about all of these different kind of tricks that the monster was supposed to be doing on stage that were cut out, I'm going to ask your opinion again. Would you have liked to have seen more of Peter Boyle standing on his tiptoes and then his heels and then holding his hands out, or are you okay with what we have?
The tricks part, that's fine to not have, but having that little bit with Igor coming out and giving that little bit of like a direction to Frankenstein would have been interesting. That would be neat. I'm definitely going to try to look that up after we're done here. Yeah,
take a look. There is a segment of this you can get as an outtake, because I do miss Igor in this scene. We do see him only for a moment because he's playing the piano. We won't get to that till tomorrow.
Oh, right.
But I would have liked to have seen him do this, but that is all stuff taken out of this minute, or taken out of what would have been in this minute or following minutes had we had the full script. You can, and Eric said he was going to go look it up, but yes, you can in fact go Google at least some of those outtakes that do exist on YouTube.
Yeah, and the outtakes are interesting. Some of them, like we've said in the past, they do shine some light on some things in the movie. It's interesting that it is no longer canon that he has no hump, or it's not canon because it's not in the movie. I don't think we lose a whole lot by losing that dialogue.
Well, when he gets the monster, as we start to get toward the end here, as he gets the monster to walk forward to the front of the stage, this is really the first time the audience claps in some sense of, wow, okay, so maybe we were wrong. He's winning the audience over.
Yeah, he is. And they're seeing the results of science. They are men and women of science, and they're seeing the experiment come to fulfillment.
Eric, with your own podcast of the Watchmen Minute, you've got a guy that's kind of science with Dr. Manhattan. How is science treated in the Watchmen compared to how it's treated here on stage?
When different scientific things are talked about, there's definitely some liberties taken, much like you have with Star Trek or what have you. There's teching the tech.
The techno-speak, techno-babble.
Yeah, that's certainly in there some, but there's some other parts that have some interesting concepts behind them, though, too. I mean, the whole idea of Dr. Manhattan, he's living his life all moments at the same time, and that's shown so effectively, I think, with the parts on where he's on Mars our time, but he's envisioning, he's thinking about, and he's living his life at a ton of other times that are shown.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is with the kind of the very loose parallels of something being created, something being reanimated, and then being something different than it was when it was to begin with. In this case of Young Frankenstein, we had what was probably a murderer. We had lines taken out that identified that he was a murderer and only his mother could love him, and so that's why he's in the prison graveyard, and now he's something other than what he was. He's not necessarily Dr. Manhattan, but he is something other than he was. Same thing happened with the Watchmen, is you have, again, through reanimation, become something other than what he was prior.
Yeah, and there's those scenes where after he's been obliterated, seemingly, at least, at this facility, he says, like, so-and-so sees, the guards see a nervous system floating, and then another person or two sees a skeletal structure. So it's this weird reconstitution of the various parts of his former body trying to come back into being as a new body.
And as far as like bringing something back from the dead, it is very cool how they handle that in The Watchmen. Rather than piecing together like they would have in the 1930 film where you're sewing an arm or a neck or a leg, which is about all you could do technology-wise, to be able to animate the system slowly, almost from the very basic central nervous system all the way through the skeletal system to the musculature to the skin, I think is really kind of cool because it does kind of give us that view of it's still reanimating, but now we're seeing how far we've come in filmmaking.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's done visually extremely well, and it has they have a blueprint from the comic that's very faithful to that too.
Well, we've seen the creature here do a couple of tricks that did make it on screen. One of my last notes I have as we start to close out this minute is, remember I said I couldn't figure out if you're going to treat him like a kid or treat him like a dog, because I can go either way. I'm back to the dog thing, because if you see very closely, he pops a treat into Peter Boyle's mouth as if, good boy. Yeah.
And it's such a subtle, quick thing, but it says so much about what he thinks of the creature. He's really kind of his pet, his creature. He's not anything more than that. But also we see that nobody is happier with the response of the audience than Inga. And she really is excited that they are accepting his work and accepting the doctor, I think.
And I wrote down, she's like a girl at a concert.
Yeah, she is. Kind of a groupie. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Feeds into my next movies by minute thing that I know a little bit about.
Yeah.
Almost Famous. Yeah. All the concert scenes there.
It does. It doesn't feel like she's watching a medical demonstration. It's like she's watching a play. She's watching something where she's really giddy excited about it.
Yeah.
Now, granted, she's happy because it's working so far.
Yeah. And I think it's obvious that she loves Dr. Frankenstein, and she is just overjoyed that the audience has begun to accept him.
So before we begin to wind the rest of this minute down, Eric, do you have anything else you want to add from minute number 80 of Young Frankenstein?
Well, two pretty quick things. Just like half the time that Dr. Frankenstein's talking, he's got some pretty great hand gestures. And really, I was just kind of watching a little part of it. And when you were talking about when he gives him the treat, well, before that, when he's getting him to walk forward, the hand gestures at that point are almost like you would with a pet. They're kind of instructive. Okay, move this way. It's almost Usher-like, actually.
Right. It's very much like he's, using the hand and like using the repetitive gestures that show this is what I want you to do. Because we do the same thing with our dogs. Like, not only do I say sit, I put my hand kind of like in a halt motion, and they know visually as well as auditorily, oh, we need to sit before we get a treat. And so they follow. And same thing like come here. We do, the come motion and say the same thing every time. So we're giving them a visual cue as well as an audible cue to try to make sure that they're doing what we want them to do.
In many ways, it's because they don't have that reasoning ability that we don't know whether the monster at this point has that reasoning ability as well. And so there are very basic commands for him to follow. In some ways, I would love to have seen Peter Boyle try to do the up on the heels and up on the toes, but I'm afraid that as big and hulking and with all that gear that he's got on, he may have gone and crashed into the audience.
That would not be good.
That would not be good.
No, not at all.
Wipe out half the crowd.
The only other thing was when Dr. Frankenstein says backwards, I found it interesting that he doesn't need to say toe to heel, but the monster creature understands, okay, I need to reverse. But they've done all this training, as we find out with the treat.
Right, exactly. Because he pops it right into his mouth, and he's got the little smile. He does it almost like he hopes the audience doesn't see.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's dead center in front of a spotlight, but he's trying to hide the idea, good boy.
It's such a great little give there for the audience. Really a masterful piece to write in there.
I like this because it feels like everything's in control right now. So, again, but so did the guys with King Kong. They thought everything was going according to plan.
Yeah, and we as the audience
until the flash bulbs went off.
It isn't going to stay this way.
No, I get the sense that this movie has shown me one thing, no matter what, we're 80 minutes into it, is I can never feel like things are going one direction for too long before it shifts the other direction.
No, and we're about to head into the third act here. The third act is off the rails.
It is. It is definitely one of those things where, well, that's why we're talking about it 1 minute at a time. It's become what is considered a classic in cinema, according to the American Film Institute. Eric, since we are going to be wrapping up with you on this Friday, I always give our guests at least their first appearance and when they've wrapped up a week with us to kind of give their final thoughts about the movie in general. Since you were only here for a handful of minutes, give us sort of a recap. What do you think of Young Frankenstein and any particular moments that stand out that just make it one of those memorable movies for you?
I mean, my absolute favorite scene in this whole movie is earlier. You've already done it, so it's not going to be a giveaway or anything. Is the charades and set a give moment.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
But yeah, there's so many more too. It was almost hard when I was trying to think about that and answer one of your questions in your listeners group on Facebook.
Yeah, that.
Okay. This one. Oh, yeah, this one. This one's definitely it.
The Sedagive, the charades game, and the fact that they almost, which was new to, which was not in the script, the fact that they almost replayed it again when he decides to when Dr. Frankenstein strangles Igor, just brilliant. It's a great scene and plays out with hardly any cuts whatsoever. It's just almost 4 minutes straight of just watching four actors on stage. It's almost like you're watching a play. Walt, anything in your notes that we did not get to?
No, I think we've covered it. Eric, I appreciate you coming and joining us this week, and I'm really excited about watching what happens next week.
Yes, we want to make sure we get everybody back for us. So before I tell you what's coming up next week on our Wilder Ride, Eric, one last time, let's give people a chance to find some other movies by minutes, including yours. We've been talking and seeing some similarities, or at least some basic similarities between a reanimated Dr. Manhattan and a reanimated, well, no similarities whatsoever besides reanimated. But if somebody wants to go see or learn a little bit more about the Watchmen movie 1 minute at a time, where do they go?
Yeah, Watchmen Minute. When you Google it, it comes up for all the things you might need to find it at, whether it's iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify. And I mean, the real URL for it is realpodcastnetwork.com/Watchmen Minute. And we're on all the big social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search Watchmen Minute.
And Walt, as we get to the weekend here, maybe some folks stumbled on this. They were searching for something else. Next thing you know, they're listening to a podcast going, whoa, wait a minute, I'm in the middle of this. Where does this all start? How do I get it all from the very beginning?
Well, you're in for a treat. Place to go is to go over to iTunes and find us there. You can start from the beginning, start with minute 0, the announcement of Young Frankenstein, all the way up to today. And I'm sure by the time you plow through all that, there will be more to listen to. You can also find us over at facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. Join in the discussion there and jump over into the listeners group and get a little bit more in depth about Gene Wilder, Young Frankenstein, and so many other actors who are associated with the movie.
If you want to participate, it's a closed discussion. It also means chances are you're not going to miss something that somebody posts. You'll get an update saying somebody added to that group discussion, so that way you won't forget to look and maybe comment and see something. And we love our listeners. We love them chiming in. And Eric, of course, you are pretty active on our listeners page as well. So we thank you for always being part of this Wilder Ride.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Come back Monday, everybody, because we are going to continue this scene. The show is going on, and so far, pretty impressive. He can walk heel to toe and toe to heel. He gets a little treat. But when we come back for minute 81, we're going to continue with where we left off with Inga clapping, and we're going to end with Pants with Stripes. Wait, what? It's a lyric. Pants with Stripes. We're going to have to just leave it at that, because we're going to be in the midst of yet another example of his cerebellar creation working full time here on the Wilder Ride.
With, finally, Dr. Frankenstein at his best.
Giving us a brand new word, cerebellar. Isn't that something you would say? Hey, y'all, he's a very cerebellar kid.
Come down to the cerebellar. Try some of my moonshine.
Yes, we'll get some moonshine. We'll take care of that cerebellar for you, no problem. You got a problem with the cerebellar? We'll take care of it.
It'll definitely affect your cerebellar.